I am Sam Johnson, from a little town outside Jackson, Mississippi. And before this happened, I used to think people who believed in werewolves were the same kind of people who bought alien insurance or saw Elvis in gas stations. Now, I keep blackout curtains nailed over every window in my house. And I haven't driven through upstate New York at night since February of 2024. There's a reason for that. Actually, there are three reasons. The first reason was the thing I saw standing beside Route 28 at 2 in the morning. The second reason was what it left nailed to my truck. And the third reason was the sound it made outside the fire tower after midnight. Back then I was doing contract work repairing communication equipment for remote forestry stations and emergency weather relays. Basically, if some lonely tower or radio repeater stopped working in the middle of nowhere, somebody paid me to drive out there and fix it. It suited me fine because I liked working alone. I've always been into engines, old trucks, rebuilding transmissions, that kind of thing. Long drives never bothered me. Most of my jobs were in the south, but every once in a while, a company out of state would subcontract me because fewer people wanted remote winter work. That's how I ended up in the Adirondacks in northern New York. The job sounded simple. A series of storm systems had knocked out intermittent communication at an old wildfire observation tower near the Moose River Plains region. The relay station would work for a few hours, then die again. The State Forestry Service wanted somebody to inspect the equipment physically because remote diagnostics weren't showing anything useful. I drove up there in my old dark green Ford F-250 with enough tools in the bed to rebuild half a garage. The trip from Mississippi took me almost 2 days. The farther north I got, the emptier the roads became. By the time I crossed deeper into the Adirondacks, snow covered everything except the black veins of highway cutting through the mountains. It was calm out there, not peaceful, just still. The kind of stillness where sound travels too far. I stopped at a gas station outside Old Forge sometime after sunset. There were only 2 other vehicles there, a rusted snowplow truck and the sheriff's SUV. The sheriff stood near the pumps drinking coffee. Big guy, gray beard, heavy winter jacket. He watched me longer than normal while I filled up. Finally, he walked over and asked where I was headed. I told him about the tower job. The second I mentioned the Moose River Plains area, something changed in his expression. Not fear exactly, more like irritation mixed with concern. He asked if I was staying overnight up there. I said probably 1 or 2 nights, depending on the repairs. Then he asked if I was alone. When I said yes, he stared at me for a second too long. "You hear anything in the woods?" he said. "Don't go looking for it." I laughed because I thought he meant bears. He didn't laugh back. Then he said something even stranger. "If something circles your camp, stay inside the vehicle." That part stuck with me. Circles your camp, not approaches, not attacks. Circles. I asked him what exactly was out there. He took a sip of coffee and shrugged. Couple hikers disappeared this winter. Then he walked away before I could ask anything else. I should have turned around right there. Instead, I bought bad gas station coffee and kept driving north. The forestry access roads were rough, even under the snow. My headlights bounced off endless trees and frozen drifts, piled shoulder high beside the truck. About an hour into the drive, I noticed something strange. There were no animal tracks anywhere, not one deer print, no rabbits, nothing. Just smooth, untouched snow stretching between the trees. That started bothering me more the farther I drove. The relay tower sat on a ridgeline accessible by an old service road. I reached the base around 10 that night. There was a small utility cabin beside the tower and enough cleared space to park the truck. The tower itself rose maybe 80 feet above the forest, a red aviation light blinking slowly through the dark. I unloaded gear, checked the generator shed, and got the cabin heater running. The place smelled like old wood, diesel fuel, and frozen dust. No electricity except the backup generator. No cell service either. I remember thinking how unbelievably quiet it was. Then I heard the first sound, a crunch. Somewhere behind the cabin, just one step in the snow. I froze immediately. Another crunch followed a few seconds later. Slow, heavy. Not quick like a deer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The cold hit hard enough to sting my lungs. The trees around the clearing stood black and perfectly still. My flashlight beam swept across untouched snow. Nothing there. I started feeling stupid for getting nervous. Then I noticed tracks near the tree line. At first I thought they were wolf prints, but the spacing was wrong, too far apart, and whatever made them had been walking upright. I remember staring at those tracks while my brain tried to force them into making sense. They led to the clearing, then stopped. No tracks leaving, just standing there like the thing had vanished. That's when I heard breathing behind me, close. I spun so fast I nearly slipped in the snow. Nothing stood there, but I caught movement near the tower legs. A shape dropping low and slipping behind the structure. Fast. Way too fast. I shouted, asking who was there. No answer came back. I told myself it had to be some local screwing around. Maybe hunters. Maybe somebody living off-grid in the woods. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. Because whatever moved beside that tower didn't move like a person. I locked myself inside the cabin that night. Didn't sleep much either. Every few hours I heard footsteps outside crunching slowly through the snow. Always moving. Always circling. But never rushing the cabin. Just walking around it over and over again. Around midnight, something scraped across the exterior wall. 3 long dragging scratches. I held a wrench in one hand and a flare gun in the other, while staring at the door for almost an hour. Around 2 in the morning, the footsteps stopped completely. That somehow felt worse. The next morning I found claw marks cut into the cabin walls, deep enough to expose pale wood underneath. Not bear marks either. These were narrower, longer, more deliberate. And nailed to the hood of my truck was a dead rabbit. Its chest had been opened cleanly, not eaten, opened, like something had been studying it. I started packing immediately after seeing that. But then I checked the relay equipment because part of me still wanted to finish the damn contract and leave. Turns out several cables had been torn apart manually. Not chewed, pulled loose. I found greasy black hair caught in one of the metal brackets. Coarse like animal fur but thicker. And the smell around the tower was horrible. Wet dog mixed with rot. That was the moment I finally accepted there was something seriously wrong out there. Still, I made the mistake of staying another night, mostly because a blizzard warning came through on the emergency radio around noon. Driving those mountain roads during heavy snowfall could have put me in a ditch. So I convinced myself waiting until morning was smarter. That decision nearly got me killed. By sunset the woods looked wrong somehow. The calm had disappeared. Even the trees creaked differently in the cold. I loaded tools back into the truck while keeping a shotgun nearby that I'd brought mainly for bears. 12 gauge, pump action, slug rounds. I remember feeling ridiculous carrying it around until the sun went down. Then I stopped feeling ridiculous. Around 8 that night, I heard howling far off in the forest. Except it wasn't like wolf howling. There were almost human sounds mixed into it, like screaming buried underneath the animal nose. It moved around the ridgeline slowly, always distant, always changing direction. Then, the generator died. Just cut out, completely. The cabin lights went black. Silence swallowed everything. I grabbed the flashlight and shotgun immediately. That's when something hit the side of the cabin hard enough to shake the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then came running footsteps outside. Not four-legged, two-legged, fast. I looked through the side window and finally saw it clearly. It crossed the clearing in a blur between the trees. Tall, gray-black fur, arms too long for its body. Its head looked wolf-like but wrong around the eyes. Too intelligent. That's the part I can never explain correctly. Animals don't look at you with calculation. This thing did. It knew exactly what it was doing. The creature disappeared behind the truck. A second later, metal screamed outside. It was dragging its claws down the side panels. I chambered a slug round and yelled for it to back off. Then everything went quiet again. I hated the quiet more than the noise, because it meant the thing was thinking. I heard slow footsteps moving around the cabin once more, circling, testing doors and windows. At one point it stopped directly outside the front wall. I could hear breathing through the wood. Then came a voice. Not a full voice, more like a broken imitation. Help. I nearly opened the damn door. That's the part that still bothers me most. It sounded weak, human, like an injured man freezing outside. But something about the tone felt wrong, flat, practiced, like listening to somebody repeat words from memory without understanding them. I stayed still. The thing outside stayed still too. Then it scratched lightly at the door, slow, patient. I backed away from the entrance and climbed the ladder to the cabin loft overlooking the main room. About 10 minutes later, the window beside the door exploded inward. The creature came through fast enough to barely register. It slammed into a table, sending wood flying across the room. I fired instantly. The shotgun blast hit it in the shoulder at close range. The thing screamed so loud my ears rang. Not wolf, not human. Both. It crashed through the broken window again and vanished into the storm outside. I stayed awake the rest of the night, gripping the shotgun so tightly my hands cramped. I thought it was over after that. I was wrong. The next morning the storm had buried everything in fresh snow. I packed the truck in record time. The second the engine started, I felt relief for the first time in 2 days. Then I looked toward the tree line. It was standing there, watching me. Broad daylight, about 70 yards away. The werewolf stood upright between the trees, with one arm hanging strangely from the shotgun wound. And even from that distance I could see its eyes locked onto me. Yellow-gray, focused, aware, not acting on instinct, hunting. I threw the truck into gear immediately. The tire spun against packed snow before finally catching. As I pulled away, the creature started following the truck through the trees, keeping pace, sometimes disappearing behind snow-covered pines before reappearing farther ahead. It was hurting me. That realization hit halfway down the mountain road. The thing wasn't chasing blindly, it was steering me somewhere. And then I saw why. A massive pine tree had fallen across the service road ahead sometime during the storm. The road was completely blocked. I slammed the brakes hard enough for the truck to fishtail sideways. The forest around me went dead silent again. Then the growling started. Close. Circling the truck from inside the trees, I grabbed the shotgun and flare gun while trying not to panic. The creature moved just beyond visibility. I'd catch glimpses between the trees, a shoulder, eye shine, claws against bark, always moving around me, never committing, like it was waiting for exhaustion or fear to do the work for it. Then it charged, straight from the left side of the road. The impact against the truck door dented metal inward violently. I fired through the side window instinctively. Glass exploded everywhere. The thing disappeared again before I could get another shot. That intelligence made it terrifying. A normal predator would have rushed. This creature tested weakness, adapted. I realized staying in the truck meant dying eventually, so I used the only advantage I had: fire. I dug road flares out from behind the seat, lit 3 of them, and hurled them into the woods. Bright red light flooded the trees. The growling stopped immediately. Then I heard movement, retreating uphill. Fast. The creature hated the light. Or maybe the hate didn't matter. I used those few seconds to hook a tow hitch from the truck to the fallen pine. The engine screamed in protest, tires spinning against snow and ice. For a second, nothing happened. Then the trunk shifted just enough. I kept pulling until there was barely enough space to squeeze through. The entire time I expected that thing to hit me from behind. It never did. Not until I was back on the main highway. That's where I saw it one last time. I looked in the rearview mirror while driving south. The werewolf stood at the edge of the tree line, near the road. Not chasing, just watching my truck disappear. And I swear to God, it smiled. Not like an animal, like a person amused by something. A week later, I got a call from the forestry service asking why I abandoned equipment at the tower. Apparently another crew had gone up there after the storm cleared. They found the cabin destroyed, walls torn apart from the inside. The relay tower itself had collapsed halfway down the ridge, metal twisted like it had been hit by construction equipment. They also found tracks around the site, big ones. The official explanation blamed a bear in February, in the middle of a snowstorm. I didn't argue with them. What was the point? Nobody would have believed me anyway. But here's the part I've never told anybody outside close friends. 3 months after the incident, I found something wedged underneath the damaged side panel of my truck while replacing it. A strip of old leather, weathered, rotting. Attached to it was a small, rusted sheriff's badge. New York State. Half the name had been scratched away. The only letters still visible were RKE. I remembered the sheriff from the gas station immediately. I called the station later that night, asked if they had a deputy with a name ending in those letters. There was a long silence on the phone. Then the woman quietly asked where I heard that name. Turns out a deputy named Walter Burke vanished near Moose River Plains in the winter of 1987. Search teams never found his body, just his patrol vehicle abandoned deep in the woods, driver's side door torn off. There were animal tracks around the scene, according to the reports. Large ones. The case was never solved. The woman asked if I knew something about it. I told her no and hung up. I still have that badge locked inside a toolbox in my garage. Every once in a while, I think about throwing it into a river somewhere, but I never do. Maybe because some part of me knows what happened to Deputy Burke. Or maybe because I know the thing I saw in those mountains wasn't just an animal. Sometimes late at night, when the wind hits the house wrong, I'll wake up thinking I hear footsteps outside, circling slowly through the dark. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Always moving, always patient. Like it's waiting for me to open the door, this time.